Welcome back. I know that the break was a little bit shorter than we had planned, but hopefully you got some coffee. Hopefully you got to go to the bathroom, answer some emails, things like that. Um, but I think we are good to go with the next session. I think that when it comes to IT, something that I've learned in my past I don't know, 13, 14 years of working with IT pros is that a lot of people do not understand the impact that IT makes until something goes wrong, and then all eyes are on IT. Um, and what people don't see are all of the efforts made behind the scenes to ensure that the whole organization is running smoothly and is a well-oiled machine. I brought on a speaker to talk a little bit about how you can improve the value of IT with data. Um, Please welcome Carmen Campos. Welcome in. Expert in all things data governance, project management, IT service management, so many things. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Carmen if you want to jump into your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the time to speak and to give you some of my experiences, what I have learned, what works, what doesn't work. Um, and then I also really want this presentation to be very interactive. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll definitely get to them as we can towards the end of the presentation. But I will probably ask you and prompt you and pause as I ask you questions throughout the presentation because I want it to be interactive. And I feel like we can all learn from each other. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, a little bit about my experience. Most of my experience has been over the last 15 years, but I've been in IT over 25 years. Um, Really, at the end of the day, my bulk of my work is really moving to really better decisions, right? Better outcomes. Um, Today, I feel like with AI, definitely we're turning data into more decisions, right? And not just reporting, right? I always tell people, okay, we have information, and then what? And we're going to go into a lot of the details about, well, what type of information do we have? How can we make better decisions? What does good look like? And then really actually even look at, measure the area that you guys are in right now and look at your maturity model as well. So um, I added this in here, why I love data. I think for me, it brings clarity and it removes ambiguity, right? And it really helps to drive those decisions to improve those outcomes. So for me, I always tell people, like I ask them, well, how are things going? And they always say, well, my gut feeling is this. And that's usually a sign of they don't have the data with the insights that are driving outcomes, um, monthly, quarterly, daily, that they need to have, right? Fingers at the data at their fingertips, where they can go and say, okay, what is the data telling me versus what I call like flat data, right? We're just reporting, right? So that's why I like it because I like to get it out of from an emotion, from this is my gut feeling to, okay, what is the actual data telling me? So I'm going to jump into that. So um, I'm not going to read all the details on the slide. I really want to add, some more context around it, but really making decisions with data, right? So I added some details and some examples that will hopefully help you guys, but at the end of the day, you need to develop what I call an IT playbook, right? You want to make them faster, easier, measurable, right? We're going to focus on some examples and tools and even opinions of different people outside of me and kind of get your thoughts around it as well. But really, this is more for like product managers, engineers, IT leaders. It might even be for operations or analysts. So at the end of the day, it's about better prioritization, fewer incidents, improve reliability, clear ROI. And what I say is bring that trust back into the data and get leaders to care about it. So why is it why is it so important right now, right? So, I mean, I'm sure everybody's busy, and so having those decisions at a very high level and really understanding what is the security, the capacity, the vendor spend, the reliability, all that at the end of the day helps you to provide truth and make it faster, right? At the end of the day, we want to be able to have reduced risk, improve ROI, SLOs, all those things, right? So I normally see when we common failure is we make decisions based on urgency, right? Like, oh, we got to get this done. Or we look at things from a very much reactive state, right? So you really want to get these better patterns using hypothesis. You can use evidence, um, and using best practices will help you as well. So, what type of these decisions will help? There's actually
Okay,
three.
Carmen.
Yeah.
I don't think you're sharing your screen, so I just wanted to.
Oh, that's weird. Let me, okay, so let's, oh, I apologize about that.
No, no, that's
No
okay. I just
wonder.
wanted to make sure that everyone saw.
Yeah. Okay. Can you guys see my screen now?
It says that you've started screen sharing, but I haven't seen anything pop up yet.
It's, can you guys see it? It says that I'm sharing.
No, it's not working. Oh, so some people say it's a that they have it, and some people say that they don't. So,
Okay, let me
uh,
stop and let me,
call IT. Yeah, I mean, well, we have plenty of folks in here, so I'll go ahead and
having
submit a ticket for y'all.
issues. Yeah. Yeah. If
We tested it too, and it still happened. So, let me see if I can share mine just in case I don't have the presentation, but I'm gonna just see uh, what happens here. You can see all of my tabs. Okay. Are y'all able to see my screen? No. Okay. Interesting. Um, I have rebooted recently. I will say. Well, I'm so sorry for the confusion here.
okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, yes, I
Okay,
can hear
great.
you. I think the slides might not be working. And I think it's an issue in Zoom because I tried to share my screen and it didn't work either.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. My Zoom
yes.
keeps crashing and it keeps telling me that to send a
Oh,
report.
I
So
can see it now.
okay. So can you guys see my
I can see
slides?
I can't see the slides, but I can see the Zoom lobby. So,
Okay, one
there we
second.
go. Now I can see
Okay.
your slides.
Okay,
We did
great.
it. We got there.
Let's see how long it lasts. I think there's something going on with Zoom. It keeps
There
crashing on me.
must be.
So
There must be,
I,
but
yeah, I apologize.
well, thank y'all
Either
for bearing
way,
with us.
yeah, yeah, bear with us. Either way, I think you should get a copy of the presentation. So
Yes,
it has a
absolutely.
lot of great um, in-depth information and real life examples that I think it will really help you guys. So back to what I was talking about, these type of decisions, there's really three at the end of the day. They're operational, they're tactical, and they're strategic. Okay. So think of operational as more like your incident response, your capacity management. Your tactical is really around like your backlog, sprint planning, release. It's kind of more like, and then your strategic is more like your vendor selection, your you might even have a vendor strategy around maybe you're deploying vendor strategies and then you're creating metrics off of that. Or you might have different platforms and then identifying what platforms they are. So they're really, if you could think about it, they're really tied around strategic, right? Is my strategy going to work? So I just want you to kind of think about that. And then I provided some examples of how to treat them, right? You got operational, those are normally like run books or what I call like work instructions. Everybody has different interpretations of those words, but depending on what organization you're in. So, and then tactical is really around like dashboards, right? That's really where you're measuring cycles, things like that. And the strategic is really around your business case, right? Your scenario, you're looking at ROI, you're looking at did we deliver on time? Did our POC actually end up being like I'm working on one right now, right? So it's a baseline where I started at my strategic and then said, okay, for these particular vendor choices, how did it end up looking like at a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year? So I just keep that approach in mind. So I want you to put in here that's really important about decision rights. Who makes the right decisions? I see so many times in organizations that organizations like blame the data, blame, the data's not good, or they're just sacrificing like, well, it's just the way we work. So, I want you to think of that one person that's going to make the decision, right? Um, and really be able to drive, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then really have a good escalation path, right? And decisions SLA, like how long are we going to wait? I always tell people at least leave a few cycles because especially when you're starting new data, you might not have the 30 days, 60 days, maybe 90 days, so much, right? So, some of the questions I want to ask you guys is, do you guys have a single owner today for some of your data? It's neither right or wrong, or just trying to get a sense of what people are saying. Do you guys have an agreement for an escalation path? Like, do you guys put decisions around like, hey, we're going to put this SLA in place. We're going to see how it works for 90 days, a week, sprint. Just kind of curious what everyone's saying. You can put those your responses in the chat. I think it would help everyone, see what organizations do today. So I'll pause there for a minute. Let you guys finish that. So really at the end of the day, we're moving from data to decision to outcome, right? So for an example, you're defining what you want and then you're tracking that impact, meaning are we even making any impact, right? And then you're looking at the speed. So I always tell people on the speed, that should align with your upper leadership when you got buy-in or whoever you ended up getting your sponsorship, right? How long are we going to wait? And then you might have where you might have to like regret what I call like rollbacks. They actually happen in metrics. So you might try something for 3 months or even 6 months and be like, yeah, this didn't work, right? But the biggest thing, what I tell people is make sure that you are creating those run books, metrics definitions, wherever you document it, because what I might consider as availability metric and how I would measure it might be something completely different from one of my peers, my leadership peers, or somebody else in the organization. So it's really important to have those metrics definitions because it also defines how things are measured. Where's the data coming from? I cannot tell you that that does bring a lot of confusion to organizations where, you know, they might be getting the data from somebody else, and then you ends up looking into more into the details, and you end up finding out they're calculating it completely different. I see it more times than I can count. So it's really important that once you've defined what those are, you're going back to that. You know, you have a core team. I always have a core team in each organization. So, for an example, if it's financial, I have somebody that I work with in the financial, in the data part, right? Not necessarily, you might have a leader involved in there, but really getting down to tell me exactly where you put the data and how you pull it and how it's calculated. So I think it's important that, yes, you work with the leaders on it and get an agreement, but you're also working with the people that are on the ground, your analysts that are pulling the data, and spend some time with them, especially if you're really defining it or you're coming up with what I call like misalignments. Like it's a little off. Oh, we'll be okay with that. Um, those can get called out and then you can lose trust. And I've been there, done that, and I've learned from it, right? So I think we can all have been there. So it's super important to get an alignment and really go across the organization that you plug into. So I have different parts like financial and HR and all these different areas, PMO, and really validate how they do it and make sure your numbers match. Because the worst thing you want to do is be presenting something over here, and then another leader that might be presenting the same metric has completely data, and now there's mistrust. So it's just a way to really make sure that you guys are doing this. So I'd love to ask, like, what's your guys' latest big decision that you guys have made, that you've had to do rollbacks, right? Where you've had to go back and look at maybe your impact wasn't the greatest or your speed wasn't the greatest, um, or even, admit that maybe we don't have metrics definitions. And that's okay, right? We're going to talk about like if you understand where you're at and then you improve from there, right? Um, so I always add a slide for avoid these traps, right? So a correlation trap is when you see two things change together, but you don't know what caused one another. So it's super important, like, do these move together or did B happen? It can get really confusing. For an example, like if you have a traffic spike or an upstream vendor outage, you're like, where did that come from? Or a cloud increase. Um, so it's super important to, to make sure that you guys are looking, um, you know, you're doing a baseline, you're really making sure on timing, you can even add, feature flags, and then you're really looking at observational, right? What are the dashboards and trends that I'm looking at? And then you're also looking at, the before and after, right? I always tell people, make sure that you do a baseline when you start, even if it's something manual. I'm doing one right now. Like we don't have any data. So old school, pull out the Excel spreadsheet, start capturing information, start asking good questions so that, you can have that good baseline. And then you can go back and experiment and then go back and say, well, are we doing better? Are we not doing better? So, um, so what I call what are these guardrails that we can put in, right? Having these metric pauses and rollbacks, not having them is super important. Having a clear roadblock plan, and then really reducing that risk, right? Because depending on who you talk to in the organization, right, your executives are going to want to know about risk and costs and avoidance and ROI versus your lower level managers will probably be looking at more like trends and things that they have to work on with on the ground. So make sure that you're having these measurable threshold, meaning your X equals Y or whatever happens that you can roll back versus you end up in a pickle and you're like, oh wow, now I definitely have to roll back. So I just want to make sure that you guys have those decisions in place, um, and you guys have a good plan. So I put together this decision framework. I'm not going to go into it too much detail, but really at the end of the day, you have a framework on how you're going to build metrics, maintain metrics, make decisions around metrics, and really learn from them, right? And go back and really have those get people in your organization. I always tell people that can give you constructive feedback, right? The worst thing you want to do is have leaders that say, oh, it looks great. When you want leaders that are going to critique it, you want leaders to from different parts of the organization. If you are doing enterprise, now obviously if you're doing an entire org, then you'll get leaders in that org, right? You want leaders to poke holes through it. You want leaders to ask the right questions. And I think that will definitely help. So it'd be interesting to know how you guys do it today. Do you guys have a decision framework? I'd love to hear from the chat. Yes or no, if you guys have one. Um, so anyways, why does it matter, right? I talked a little bit about that, but it really impacts, engineering reliability. It really impacts security, cost, and service. So again, depending on the leadership that you talk to, you need to tie your metrics based on that, right? So my executives, I'm going to tie my security, my cost, and then maybe some areas that they care about the most right now. Maybe it's speed, right? And I'm looking at, velocity and different things like that, and ROI, and upper level organizational metrics, meaning how is the entire organization performing. So just wanted to keep that in mind. I think trusting the data is super important. I always tell everybody, especially if you're new creating metrics, take that extra step to validate your data, because I always tell people that it only takes one moment for leadership to untrust the data, or they're like, yeah, this doesn't make sense, and you're not able to speak to the data, or you're trying to pull it together at the last minute in the meeting and you're like, you can't even figure out the correlation. So one, you need to know the data. You need to understand it. And as the people that report to you that might, be working on the data day in, day out, you need to help have them explain it to you so that you can be able to explain it to the leaders, because it only takes one moment to have the leaders mistrust it, especially if you have different people in the organization that says, well, that doesn't line up to what I do. So it'd be interesting if you guys have been up in that situation before. I have been there um, many times. And so I have learned now that, going back in the tip I was talking about, is get those leaders alignment with those leaders. Start doing those meetings before the meetings, especially if you're doing upper executive leadership, um, where you're getting buy-in, where you're sharing new metrics, things like that. Obviously, you will put as part of quality, you're going to want to have your team do spot checks. But at the end of the day, like you want to make sure that the leaders can trust your data and that you have good data that is repeatable, that is preferably an API connection, that's automated, that you have good measures in place, good data qualities in place, because that's super important. So I put some examples here, around like cloud cost. Cloud cost is very big right now. So I put some examples around, like, say you want to reduce it by 50%. I put some examples of like, hey, maybe you want to look at per transaction, and then you might want to approach it, 8 to 12 weeks. Now, again, these are things that I have done, not necessarily things that you have to do, but these are some good examples that you guys might want to do. And I feel like most organizations are moving to the cloud. And so I just want to make sure that you guys are really sticking to the cost, because the cost can be very up creeping, meaning you're having someone on a monthly, depending how big of your scope, maybe even bi-weekly, looking at it just so that you don't have any surprises. So release gating. So I always say release go or no go, right? These are where like you're really doing your flag exposures, rollback readiness, policy violations, and really get creative with it. Start what I tell my people now, and we're still in the workings of, is how to automate things, but also engage the end customer, right? Your end customer most likely will be internally, right? So how do we engage with them, but not be so spammy, when we're doing security checks? So we're looking at some AI creative things right now. So, and I always tell people say that doesn't exist. That's great. Then let's go make it happen, right? Let's go find ways to make it happen. So I think it's super important that we're looking at, we don't just stick to the norms. We go outside the box and always look for different ways. So um, I also want to give some common traps and how to avoid them. So I call like vanity metrics, where there's no really activity. There's just tickets closed, tickets open. It doesn't really tell me anything. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this information? I talked a little bit about the correlation earlier, but you really at the end of the day want to have like preferably an end-to-end service health, right? Not just like, hey, this is this single team metric and that's this single team metric, and it ends up being that problem that I was telling you about, where this person calculates it this way and they have a different, I mean, it's close but maybe not the same, and that's where you start to lose confidence. So I always tell people, don't be overconfident. Really take the time to do the analysis, to get into the data, really understand, okay, this is what we decided in our playbook. um, my data engineer or myself, whoever's doing that, go and validate that that's what it is. So, and then I'll talk a little bit about more dashboard information if we have time. But this is more, right, like every chart should have a decision and should have an owner. And you should have a retire of unused metrics. The way I normally do it is I use metrics, I change them based on business needs, meaning I don't just use what's recommended. Yeah, it's a good starting point. You can use, chat gbt has a lot of options, a lot of different technologies and outsourcing that you can do, hiring third party vendors that will help you as well. But really, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you have that information and you're okay with it. You're like, okay, we know the decision we need to make. We know the owner, and we know when we need to retire them. So, for like the scope that I'm doing, it is so large, such a large organization that the strategy comes out for the end of, or the beginning of the year, I should say, um, you start working on the end of the year. So beginning of the year, it gets communicated out. And then you start to really connect your value streams, like what does the company care about right now, right? And then from there, you connect, maybe your strategy. And then from there, you start to connect it to your IT leadership goals, right? So at the end of the day, you are presenting metrics that, especially at an executive level, that people care about at that moment. Because if you start presenting too much, you start to lose people, and then it just becomes like it's this data somewhere over here. And we'll talk a little bit about that on the maturity model. But I wanted to add, I call it make it stick, IT operating model for it, right? So you want to have a decision log. I briefly talked about that, right? Have a one page for every major decision, right? That's your context, your metrics, your trade offs, the outcomes, right? And then if you can do it weekly, you can do it bi-weekly, just depends on your scope. Just 30 minutes an hour, mine is more of an hour, really looking at, okay, how are we doing, right? And I always tell people, don't be scared to experiment, right? Small little bites of like, okay, well, let's try to pivot this way and see if we can get what we're looking for, right? Um, and I call also like post incident learning, right? I do what's called a blameless RCA. I think if you get into the mode of whether it was this so and so or this organization that did it in these RCAs. So anybody that doesn't know that term is root cause analysis. It's usually a meeting after a major incident. That's usually how they, some people have different terms for it. Some people call it postmortems. But really, at the end of the day, is you're looking at what was the cause of that outage. And so you want to create an environment that is inviting, and you're not saying, oh, well, I'm just going to use fake names. John Smith did it, or we're looking at more the cause, and then being okay with corrective actions, preventative metrics around that. So I find a lot of organizations, they don't share. Right. I always tell people, I want to know, I want to learn from you. You guys are the ones doing this day in, day out. When you have a postmortem meeting, you have everybody in there. That's a great opportunity to really get down to what really happened. And you start asking those tough questions, not from oh, I'm telling you what to do. I'm here with you, and we need to solve this together so we can provide a better working experience or customer service experience, whoever your audience is, right? So I always tell people, I want to learn from you. Tell me, do you have better ideas on how to solve this? And that's where you start to get a lot of ideas. You start to work with leaders and be like, John Smith gave me this great idea that we could possibly solve it this way. Or, take a corrective action on, maybe even having a separate meeting to talk about and go deeper about, maybe some potential causes. I don't know, I'm just trying to throw some ideas out there and things that I have learned. And I have found that if you get a blame list, very restrictive, restrictive post-mortem, you're going to get less people to give you insights on what's really happening. You got to be able to ask those tough questions. And it's just being like so tell me more, um, can you give me more insights of what really happened, and walk them through it, right? Of like start from where it happened and then where it ended. And from that's where you get a lot of the learnings. I get so many ideas from those. Some of them have turned out to be like, yeah, we're not doing that right now, or that's a crazy idea. I've never heard of that. We've never done that. Well, we got to get away from never done that, never heard of that mentality. We have to be able to explore and have a good conversation, especially around those critical data sets and the dashboards and the definitions. Because if not, then that's where confusion comes in. So I wanted to add a slide here of, now that we've talked about so much, I want you to just take a minute and look at the slide and ask yourself, where are you today? Where is your organization today? And it's okay. I have parts of areas of business that I handle, and I'm still at one, right? Because they're new. I'm still discovering it, right? I'm still very much in pilot mode. But you really want to make sure you're looking at this consistently and you're coming up with a plan, right? How can I be more mature? And it's not so much in my tools, it's more about ownership, it's about standards, it's about cadence, and it's about those guardrails we talked about. Okay. Um, so some real life examples, like you might have an L2 to an L3, or level 1 to level 2, they might have different root cause views, like I kind of talked about earlier, or forecasting from L3 to L4, you're forecasting incident volume, and you're looking at cloud span and run scenarios and setting thresholds, right? And then L4 to L5 is really more around automate, um, and really remove that human aspect of it. Obviously you'll have audit logs, you'll have like your what I talked about, those decisions, what I call the kill criteria, like, yep, we're going to kill that metric, it's not going to work, or that level of data is not giving us what we want, and be willing to explore it. Get your people excited about the data. It can be challenging, and it could also be very boring depending on what you like. So I always tell people, like, um, you know making sure that definitely at the L4, L5 level, that you're really looking at, they're really moving instead of a reactive, this is what's happened. They're really looking into, like, okay, forecasting, super powerful, right? If we could only forecast. Now, I'm going to make the caveat, you can't, the way it's going to do it is based on historical data. That's the main way. Now, there's a lot of new AI stuff that I'm actually working on right now. Like, I'm like, yeah, I might not, it's a new metric. I don't have AI. I mean, I don't have the historical data. What other ways that we can think about this, right? So it's okay to challenge your team, and it builds collaboration. It builds partnership. So again, are you at the ad hoc reporting? Right, you're manually pulling it. This team's pulling it, that team's pulling it, and you're compiling it together, and then you're putting it into maybe a Power BI dashboard, and then they're looking at everything historically, like what happened last month, right? And that's okay, right? But you have to ask yourself, what do you need to do to mature, right? And then your level 2 is more around your standard dashboards, right? Shared KPIs, basic SLAs, self-service views, right? Having people, you might have them, give them access to certain databases, read only, where they're pulling and making their own reports. That's great, right? And then you're moving into more like the diagnostic insights, right? That's kind of like what we've been talking about, right? What's your drivers? What's causing it? Um, segmentation, action thresholds. So I always tell people when they look at a chart, and if you can't answer what I need to do out of it, and I'll talk, hopefully, we'll have time to talk a little bit about it, but um, you want to make sure that you're asking the questions of, you know, what is the root of this? You know, don't necessarily look at the end result. Like, what are we trying to solve? Are we trying to solve ROI? I think sometimes, and I have been a fault of this, is we can get so busy and okay, I got to have this metric, but does it really solve what you're trying to do? Um, and I always tell people, especially when you're starting brand new, I mean, like very little, 3 to 5, metrics, and then start with your insights and wait for that level 4, level 5, right? So I just wanted to also give like, start with ownership metrics, data sets. I kind of talked a little bit about that. Start with the standards, what we talked about, those definitions. I'm going to go back to that. I know change management becomes norm, meaning like your team's got to be okay with change. And that's as a leader, you have to impart that. You have to be part of that, right? And you have to have a team environment that that you welcome change. I always say two brains work better than one. This is not just Carmen's team. It's not just Carmen's ideas. This is our ideas. What do you think? And pause and wait for people, kind of like drive it out of them. And you'd be surprised. Some of those introverts have some really great ideas. So, I don't know if you experienced that in the past. If you have, please comment in the chat. Love to hear from you. And then, like I said, your predictive and your decision automation, that's very, very mature. I've only seen parts of the business in different areas that I've worked in that have matured in that, but it's taken a lot of years. Most organizations stay between that 2 to 3 maturity, right? But don't just stay there. Figure out ways to, forecasting. AI is so big right now, and that's where I'm taking my team is like, how do we get to more predictive prescription? How can I not just move from insights, but actually even tell my executives of what potentially is coming that we can avoid? That's powerful, right? So I want to close with some good, you know, um, tips, right? So start with a decision. Why are we choosing this today? Your headline in your charts should tell you the conclusion, right? Um, if someone can look at a chart and not know what it's trying to say, you got to relook at that, right? So I always tell people if you're presenting in a PowerPoint slide, remove the clutter, just do one chart and speak to it and add context, right? Super important, right? Where you started, your baseline, how confident is your data? If you're not so confident, be open and honest about it and be like, we're piecing this data together. Our confidence level is low, but we wanted to start with something, right? Versus you're not saying anything and then they're like, this data doesn't match. Well, our confidence level was low. I didn't know that, right? So I know this sounds harsh, but I always end with, so what? Now what? Right? A leader looks at a chart and if they're going to ask, so what? What is this telling me? Right? So I kind of gave some tips. If you're looking at trend over time, you can do line charts and gave you some examples there. If you're comparing categories, you're doing bar charts. And then, for an example, if you're doing you know, relationship, kind of do like scatter. I like that. Pattern, I use heat map a lot. Um, and then I also use things that are happening by hour and day, right? Especially if you're looking for trends. And use AI to help you, you know, don't have to try to figure this all out on your own. So I kind of put some thoughts together on a 30, 60, 90-day plan if you were just completely starting over from scratch, right? Going back to like picking those two or three priority decisions. Again, what does leadership care about? All right. It's got to tie to that. It's got to tie to your goals because if not, people are going to check out. People are going to be like, I got to work on something else that's important. And then define those metrics. Owners, having a real simple decision log, right? Because I will tell you when it comes back, you're like, who changed this? No one updated. You have no idea. You don't know the context around it. It just is a mess. And, one of the ideas is you could start a baseline dashboard if that helps you, right? Like, this is where I started. That way you can always be going back to it and be like, oh, yeah, we have made improvement, right? And then adding those thresholds, guardrails, automate, 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 refresh as often as you can, and bring up alerts. Um, I also I briefly talked about it, but starting with some type of reviewing the metrics, publishing your learnings, documenting all that stuff because it's a lot. It's a lot to capture and to figure out why you went a certain decision, right? So by the 90 days, you should be able to standardize what your metric catalog is. Maybe you have some templates. I started actually even with Power BI creating metrics that I'm using, outputs of our leadership goals and automatically filling in those fields and then providing automatic metric measurements per leadership. So it's just an idea. I like to throw them out there. If you have an idea, please put it in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Like I said, we can all learn from each other and scale, right? Onboard more teams, try to figure out so for right now, we're just looking at, this big project that I'm working on is just looking at the core of what is our organization doing. Eventually you're like, okay, now I want to add finance. Now I want to add HR onboarding. Now I want to add head count and capacity. And I mean, it can get pretty powerful. So, but the biggest thing is measure impact, fewer, what are you having? Fewer incidents, faster delivery, ROI, what is going back to your, whatever your pick, your two or three decisions, right? It's super important. Um, I added actually some core tips from Gartner because again, I'm always learning. And I saw them and I was like, you know what? I think this would be really great to add them. Gardner has been an amazing resource, to have, and to learn from them. And so I always tell people, don't stop learning. You just being here, you're saying you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to increase your maturity model for your data. So kudos to you. So some core tips. Start decision first, not just data first. Like, okay, define your decision and your action, right? That's what really moves leaders, to drive really consistency, those good calls, right? Um, it enables speed, super important, right? Prove value at scale, right? Prioritize data quality by importance, right? And then by quality gap, right? So use metadata, you know, governance is all about, um, I say AI ready, but it's really around trust. Going back to what scenarios that I have been into. So, if you've been there, please comment. I have been there because I know I'm not the only one. So, how do we authorize this? I briefly talked about it just to reaffirm one page decision record, right? Your decision SLAs, right? Your evidence. Am I getting better, holding out, not? And then what I tell people is put together an executive ready storytelling, right? So that's where you're talking about that chart, the context, the background, your threshold, um, because you don't want to just create these metrics on an island. You want to share what you're learning, and not just like in situations like this. You want to share with leaders, right? So, for example, a lot of the metrics that we are developing and we're refreshing right now based on our strategy, right? I mentioned you want to be looking at, okay, with the leaders, get the yes before the real meeting, right? So get to meet with them, talk to them, explain to them how the metrics are, help them understand it, and get final feedback from them, right? Like, that way at the end of the day, you are walking away with a yes, right? They're not, might not even directly say it, but you ask them, do you have any more questions? Is there anything I can clarify you before we go present? Nope, nope. That's what you want. You want people, you want leaders to poke holes through it. Obviously, you want leaders to give you constructive feedback. And you want leaders, most importantly, is to get those questions asked with you and them in the room, because the worst thing you want to do is go present and everybody has questions. And so everybody walks away from that meeting and of, yeah, that we're not ready, you know, and that's not what you want, right? I always tell people, have the meeting before the meeting. And I have found for myself, individual one-on-ones, if not no more than two people, is better, because I found the more people you have, one, I found some leaders don't like to ask questions in front of others. Um, so if you have them on a one-on-one, they're more likely to be like, okay, could you help me understand how this is calculated? Right. And that's what you want. You want them engaged. You want their buy-in, right? And so it's super important. I always work on top down and bottom up approach, meaning I'm working with the leaders below, right? The people that I'm engaging with, they already know about it. The leaders that we connect with. So, as if I'm going from top down approach, those leaders are going to be asking their leaders, hey, what do you think about this? And they're going to hopefully say, it's great. I've already met with Carmen and we've went through it in fine detail and I'm fully on board. So that's what you want. Um, so I don't think we're going to have enough time to go into all the case studies. Um, but I added this in there just to kind of help you guys on the before and after. But in closing, because I want to give you guys at least a few minutes to ask questions, um, is frame the decision, pick a few metrics that matter, um, baseline, test, and decide what those are, document those decisions and learnings. So I would like to ask you guys is what are some of your top IT decisions you're making today? And which metrics would you change now that you've I've showed you a little bit about the insights and driving data. So I'd love to hear and share openly with everybody, because again, we can all learn from each other of what metrics we can change this quarter. Again, I've told you guys what metrics we're changing is we're aligning our stuff to really focus on narrow down on those business values. The We have a lot of other metrics, and that's great. We will still show those, but especially at the executive level, we want them to be narrowed in on what's the most important. Okay. And then I added a slide of some of the summits that, if you guys are interested, and I'm not connected to them in any way, shape, or form or fashion. Um, some of these are coming right up, but it'd be a great way to get plugged in, to learn more and to figure out what other people are doing. I always tell people, like right now, because I'm in IT, I work with a business, and I'm like, okay, business, I look for my counterparts in the business side, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? What are you learning? Let's meet on a monthly basis and we share ideas, um, because it's not just about what I'm learning, what I'm doing, but how can we share and then eventually connect, right? The business and IT. I think right now, I have seen a lot of organizations, it's very much separated. It's business is here, the IT is here. If something comes over, it gets thrown over the fence, but we really collaborate very well around metrics. Um, and that's something that I'm looking to change. you know the culture in my organization is like, let's learn from each other, be open and share from each other, and not feel scared that, oh gosh, they're gonna go create something that I had a great idea for. Learn from each other, and then from there, find ways to connect, from the business side, figure out metrics on the business side and how to connect it with IT. That's super powerful. That in itself is a whole nother is a whole nother session. But I'd like to give a few minutes for any questions that we may have. And if we don't have any time for questions, Brittany, we can follow up with them later, and I can respond as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you might have gone over it, but basically, for anyone working in a smaller business, do you see upper management not following any of this? It seems most just look at a number and say yes or no. So, what do you do when you get that kind of resistance from upper management?
So they're resisting on what the data is telling them. Is my understanding?
Yeah, yeah. You're telling them, hey, this is what the data is saying, this is what we should be doing, and then they are still kind of not listening. They just look
Yeah,
at the number, how much it's going to cost, and say yes or no.
yeah. So I think it's super important to, one, have a meeting before the meeting. Okay. Um, because there's probably some questions. I'm just being really honest. Like, some leaders don't like to look like they don't know it all, everything in a group setting. That's why I like to do it more on a one-on-one, because we get really detailed in their area and something that they care about. Um, the other thing too I have found is sometimes we create these metrics, but we don't connect it to what they care about. It's like we're on this island alone, and we want them to care about it. And so they're just kind of like checking off the box. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it doesn't connect with what they care about. That's where going back and connecting it to their value streams, their goals, is super critical.
Okay. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that puts us right at time. So, I really appreciate your time. It seems like everybody got some really good information out of this. And then I
Right.
just wanted to make sure they're going to be receiving,
Yeah.
all of this, all of these
Yes,
slides and stuff.
correct.
Awesome. Awesome. So
Yep.
yeah, if anybody missed anything, I know Nora, you mentioned wanting to rewatch and take better notes. We'll have all of that, available to you. Um,
Yep.
and yeah, we'll be sending that out. I'll also post everything in the lab too, just so that you have
Great.
it in multiple places. So
Okay.
yeah, well, thank y'all so much for joining. We're gonna
Thank
go take a
you.
15-minute break, and then we're gonna be back on at 10:30 a.m. Central, 11:30 Eastern to talk to Nate about building a more cohesive team. So, but thank
Great.
you so much, Carmen. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Take care.
Okay.